Some wounds don't bleed. They etch themselves into clean paper with your name at the top. $523,000. A debt. A betrayal written in forged cursive. My family called it helping. I called it identity theft. No shouting, no storm. I just started gathering evidence and walking away. It was the kind of Wednesday that should have been forgettable. Late afternoon light filtered through my apartment blinds, casting long, dusty stripes across the floor. I had just set my chip coffee mug on the desk, the last sip gone bitter in my mouth, when my phone lit up. Unknown number. I almost let it go. But something in me, some old instinct, the kind you don't learn but inherit, told me to answer. Hello, is this Emily Carter? The voice was male, crisp, professional. Something in his tone stiffened my spine. Yes, I said, already uneasy. This is Charles from Liberty National Bank. We're calling regarding your overdue mortgage balance of $523,000. My breath caught. I think you have the wrong person. No, ma'am, he replied, firm but not unkind. The loan was taken out 3 years ago. Your name, date of birth, and social security number match exactly. You are the primary borrower. I stared at the dust motes suspended in the fading light, unmoving, as if the world had narrowed to that one sentence. A mortgage for over $500,000? I don't own a house, I managed. I rent. He repeated the facts like a robot, each one slamming harder than the last. I tried to interrupt, tried to make sense of it, but the words blurred, slipped through my fingers, like smoke. I promised to look into it and hung up, but my hands were shaking. I stared at the phone like it had delivered a death sentence. For a few seconds, all I could hear was the hum of my old desktop's fan, the creak of the radiator, the distant bark of a dog somewhere down the street. My apartment, with its slanted ceilings and secondhand furniture, suddenly felt too small, too exposed. I don't know what made me think of her first. Madison, my sister. Or maybe I do. Maybe it was because 3 years ago she was flitting around family barbecues, waving Pinterest boards on her phone, talking about needing something bigger, something better. She said it with that breathy, half-laughing voice of hers, the one that always sounded like she expected someone else to pick up the check. And they did. Because Madison was the golden child, the one who needed a little extra help, the one Mom called delicate, the one Dad excused because she's still finding her path. Me? I was the sturdy one, the one who never needed anything, the dependable backbone, and apparently the name they signed away, like it didn't belong to a real person. I opened drawers I hadn't touched in months, digging through old tax forms, contracts, student loan statements, anything that could prove what I already knew, that I hadn't bought a house, that I hadn't signed any mortgage, that I hadn't been asked. But as I searched, a slow, cold truth settled deep in my bones. This wasn't a clerical error. This wasn't identity theft by a stranger. This was closer than that. This was blood. I sat down hard, pressing my palms to my eyes until stars bloomed behind my lids. I felt something, rage, maybe, or heartbreak, but it was too early to name. All I knew was that something fundamental had shifted, that my life, the one I'd quietly built brick by brick, had been treated like a spare room someone else could live in. My phone buzzed again. A text from Mom. Hey, sweetheart, family dinner on Sunday? Hope your week's going well? I stared at the screen, the words sitting there like a joke I hadn't been told. Family dinner. Like everything was normal. like I hadn't just found out I was buried under a mountain of debt I didn't make. I typed back, "Sure." Then I locked my phone and let the silence stretch, because before anything else, before the confrontation, before the unraveling, I needed to see how deep this betrayal went. And when I found out, I would decide what kind of silence I wanted to return it with. They always said I was the strong one, the reliable one, the daughter who didn't need anything. And I suppose I wore that label well. Quiet, uncomplaining, dependable like the sunrise. But what they never asked was what it cost to be that girl, to be the one who didn't make waves while everyone else learned how to swim. Even as a kid, I knew my place in the Carter family dynamic. While Madison danced barefoot on countertops and spilled grape juice on rented tuxedos, I was the one fetching paper towels. She broke things. I fixed them. She cried. I apologized. She needed help. I disappeared to make room. There's a picture on my parents' mantle, Thanksgiving, maybe 10 years ago. Everyone's laughing. Madison's in the center, mid-laugh, hair catching the sunlight just right. My parents flank her like bookends, heads tilted toward her, adoration practically glowing. And me? I'm in the background, half cut out of frame, holding a serving tray. That's who I was. Not the main character, just the steady understudy. The invisible scaffolding, holding everyone else upright. Madison was always chasing something. A boutique clothing line that folded in 6 months. A health podcast that turned into a string of sponsored smoothies. Then a wellness influencer phase, detox teas, crystal pyramids, Instagram posts with curated lighting, and borrowed quotes about inner peace. And every time she fell short, and she always did, someone cushioned her fall, usually with my parents' money. And when theirs ran thin, with mine. They'd never say it directly, of course. That would have required too much honesty. But the pattern was unmistakable. The first time, it was a temporary loan after her car lease defaulted. I never saw a dollar returned. The second, they asked if she could stay in my apartment for a few weeks. She stayed 6 months and left the place smelling like patchouli and resentment. I paid to replace the damaged security deposit. Madison just needs a little help right now, Mom would say, her voice so soft it barely touched the air. You know how she is. And I did know. I knew she never finished anything, that she confused pity for love, that she weaponized her fragility to get what she wanted. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't imagine, is that one day they'd use me not just as the emotional net, but the legal one too. That they would sign my name, onto her mistakes like it was theirs to give. Still, if I'm honest, part of me isn't surprised. The groundwork had been laid for years. When I graduated college with honors, Dad barely looked up from the game. When I got my first real promotion, Mom asked if Madison had seen my news. Like it didn't count unless she approved. No celebration, no pride, just polite applause, if they remembered at all. They called me strong, and I believed them. But now I see it clearly. They didn't mean strong. They meant convenient, quiet, disposable. That's what strength meant in my family, the ability to carry everyone else's weight while pretending it didn't crush you. And maybe for a long time, I bought into that. Until the bank called. Until the silence cracked wide open. Until I realized the strongest thing I could do wasn't carry them. It was let them fall. The email came late the next morning. The bank representative had been polite, mechanical even, as she confirmed my request and forwarded the documents. A simple PDF attachment, no password, no warning. Just one click away from everything I never agreed to. I hesitated before opening it. My coffee had gone cold, untouched. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of my laptop. The cursor hovered for a second too long before I double-clicked. It opened. And there it was, page after page. My name printed in bold at the top of every form. Emily Carter, scrawled in looping cursive at the bottom of mortgage agreements, disclosure statements, notarized confirmations. All of it. Dozens of signatures, initials beside loan terms, my consent sprawled across margin after margin, like graffiti on a wall I didn't build. I stared at it for a long time. At first, I didn't even feel anger, just this eerie numbness that crept in like a tide, slow and unstoppable. I zoomed in on the signature. It was good, too good. The loops were almost perfect. The slant, familiar. Whoever did it had studied me. They'd copied not just the structure, but the rhythm, the hesitation in the E, the sharp curve on the R in Carter. But they missed something only I would notice. The signature was too smooth, too practiced. Mine had always carried a tremble, a hesitation born of doubt I never voiced. This one was confident, and that made it a lie. I kept flipping through the pages, each one landing with the weight of betrayal. There were initials in boxes I'd never seen, legal jargon I never read, approval clauses I never gave. Every click of the arrow key was like watching a stranger wear my skin. I found myself gripping the edge of the table, trying to stay grounded. My knees had started to go numb beneath me. The air in the room felt thinner. They hadn't just borrowed my name. They'd colonized it, planted their flag in my identity like it was abandoned territory, free for the taking. No phone call, no discussion, just a quiet decision made behind closed doors, probably around a kitchen island while I was too busy paying my bills to notice the knives being sharpened. It was never a mistake. It was a calculation. They knew I wouldn't scream. They knew I'd understand, because that's what I'd always done. Because Madison needed help. Because I was the strong one. Because family sticks together, even when it means being stabbed by the people who taught you to smile through pain. I closed the document and leaned back in my chair. The ceiling above me cracked faintly in the corners, something I'd never noticed until now. My breath came in shallow waves. A knock on the door would have shattered me. A phone call from Mom with her soft, guilty voice would have unmade me. But no one called, no one knocked, and somehow that silence screamed louder than anything they could have said. That's when the truth settled in, not like a revelation, but like cement around my ankles. They hadn't just signed my name, they'd signed me away, and they counted on the same thing they always had, that I'd stay quiet. But for the first time in my life, silence didn't feel like strength. It felt like surrender, and I was done surrendering. I didn't scream. I didn't march to their front door, demand answers, or cry into the phone. Instead, I opened a blank spreadsheet. I listed every document I had, every date, every amount. I printed out the mortgage papers, highlighted every forged signature in yellow. I retrieved my original ID scans, credit reports, old tax forms. I found birthday cards from Mom that said, "To our responsible girl, thank you for holding everything together." I included those too, not for the courts, but for me, a private archive of every time they'd buried guilt beneath a compliment. I didn't eat much that week. Sleep came in fits, but I read, God did I read, blogs on identity theft, legal forums, cases that never made the news. Late at night, I clicked through endless tabs, fingers numb from scrolling, eyes bloodshot from the glare. I learned the vocabulary of the violated, fraudulent conveyance, forged acknowledgement, criminal impersonation. They sounded clinical, clean. but I knew what they really meant. It meant someone I loved had hollowed me out and filled in the blanks. I searched for lawyers discreetly. I didn't want a friend of a friend. I wanted someone who wouldn't flinch, someone whose office smelled like old wood and closed-door secrets. I found Mr. Warner through a local legal subreddit, an older man known for his work in real estate litigation and a reputation for never being shocked by anything anymore. I met him at a small co-working space off Piermont Avenue, the kind of place where tech startups drank espresso beside single dads finalizing divorces. The room smelled like burnt coffee and cold ambition. He greeted me with a nod. Didn't ask if I was sure, just gestured for the folder. I laid it out like a crime scene, each page in order, labeled, clipped. My hands shook once, but I kept them on my lap. Mr. Warner read slowly, brow furrowing in thought, but never disbelief. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair and tapped a pen against his chin. "You understand what this means, don't you?" he asked. "I do," I said. My voice didn't waver. "It's criminal. It's personal. It's going to get messy." I nodded. "But I want it fixed." He gave me a short list. His handwriting was neat, almost delicate. File a police report. Notify the bank in writing. Include all supporting evidence. Send everything via certified mail. Prepare for formal dispute proceedings. Be ready to sever ties. It wasn't a plan for revenge. It was a blueprint for reclaiming something they'd assumed I wouldn't protect. After I left, I sat in my car for a long time, the city moving around me in soft chaos, horns, heels, sirens in the distance. I rolled the windows halfway down and stared at the list, ink still fresh, the paper warm from my hands. This wasn't about getting even. It was about getting free. And I'd already taken the first step, not with fire, not with fury, but with facts, silence, and the certainty that I was no longer theirs to use. I mailed the letters on a Thursday, each envelope sealed tight, each signature deliberate, each stamp placed with care, like a final nail in a long-ignored coffin. The woman at the post office didn't know what she was witnessing, but I did. This was no errand. It was the beginning of extraction. My name, pulled from the wreckage they buried it under. The police report was filed the same afternoon. I stood in the precinct's fluorescent quiet, handing over a neatly organized file that might as well have been a love letter to every version of myself they'd overlooked. The officer glanced through it, brow furrowed, but never questioned me. When he asked if I was sure I wanted to proceed, I said yes. I said it once, and it echoed in me like a vow. Then Sunday came. The house looked the same, white shutters, manicured lawn, the kind of place people drive by and assume stability lives there. I stood on the porch longer than I needed to, not out of hesitation, but because I wanted to remember what it felt like before I rang the bell as a stranger. Mom opened the door with her usual smile, that practiced maternal warmth that had long since stopped reaching her eyes. "Emmy, you're early," she said, already turning toward the kitchen. The scent of pot roast and lemon-scented cleaner wrapped around me like a memory I didn't want. Dad was parked in his recliner, beer in hand, watching the game like the country wasn't burning beneath him. Madison was sprawled on the couch, legs tucked under her, phone in hand. Designer bag tossed at her feet, nails perfectly manicured in some trendy shade of nude. She glanced up and gave me a smile, so casual, so empty, it nearly took my breath away. Dinner unfolded like it always did, talking over each other, laughter that didn't quite reach me, a performance they didn't know I'd stopped auditioning for. Madison complained about how expensive it was to reseed her lawn. Apparently, Bermuda grass is high maintenance, she said, like that revelation deserved applause. Dad grunted something about football. Mom asked if I was still working too much and reminded me, again, that life was short. And I listened. I let them bask in the illusion. I chewed, nodded, passed the salad. And then, as the plates were being cleared, I set my fork down. "Hey," I said, softly. 3 sets of eyes turned toward me, expecting something small, something forgettable. "Does anyone know about a mortgage in my name?" Silence. Not the awkward kind. The kind that freezes the air. Madison was the first to move. Her hands dropped from her lap to the edge of the table. Her posture shifted, spine straightening like prey, sensing the trap. Mom blinked. Her lips parted, forming a smile that never quite landed. Dad coughed once, then cleared his throat, pretending to adjust his watch. "I'm not accusing," I said, my voice even. "I just want to understand." Madison's face tightened. "It's not a big deal," she said too quickly. "You weren't using your credit. It was just paperwork." Just paperwork. Mom reached for my hand, her fingers cool and rehearsed. "Honey, Madison, just needed a little help. You're doing so well. We didn't want to burden you with all the details." Burden me. I looked at their faces, really looked. They didn't think they had done anything wrong. They thought it was love. They thought I should feel honored to be the foundation under their collapsing ambitions. I leaned back, let the silence stretch. "Okay," I said. No rage, no performance, just a quiet retreat from the battlefield they never realized they'd already lost. They exhaled, relieved. The storm hadn't come, but what they didn't understand, what they never would, is that I wasn't waiting for an apology. I was waiting for the paperwork to arrive, for the letters to be signed and delivered, for the walls they'd built on my name to come crumbling down. And by the time they felt the quake, I'd be long gone. The silence that followed my question wasn't awkward. It was incriminating. I watched it unfold like a slow-motion car crash, the way Madison's mouth opened, then shut again, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her overpriced cardigan, the way Dad suddenly became fascinated by his empty plate, eyes fixed downward, like maybe if he didn't look up, none of this would be real. And Mom leaned forward, her voice soft and rehearsed, the kind of tone reserved for breakups and dead pets. "It's not what you think, honey," she said gently, like I'd stumbled across some childhood misunderstanding instead of a federal crime. "It's not a big deal." Madison jumped in, her voice sharp, almost annoyed. "It's family, Emily. Families help each other. It was just paperwork." There it was, that word again, paperwork. Like my identity was a form they could fill out over coffee and forget by dinner. Like a $523,000 loan tied to my name was just a misplaced receipt from the grocery store. I looked at Madison first. Her eyes were defiant but glassy, like she hadn't decided if she should keep lying or start begging. I saw the edge in her smile, tight, trembling at the corners, and realized she was waiting for me to blow up, waiting for the drama, the scene, the predictable unraveling of the good daughter finally snapping. But I didn't give her that. I turned to Mom. She still had her hand halfway across the table, fingers outstretched like a lifeline. "We didn't want to worry you," she whispered. "You were always so independent, strong. There it was again, the badge they pinned to my chest every time they needed to justify leaving me behind. I nodded slowly, as if their explanations mattered, as if their words could reach me through the wall, I had finally learned to build. And then I leaned back in my chair and folded my hands in my lap. No yelling, no tears, just stillness. Because the thing they never understood was that sometimes silence is the sharpest knife in the drawer. They thought they were getting away with it, that they'd spin this into a misunderstanding, a family thing, a blip on the radar of sisterhood and sacrifice. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't see, was that while they were performing innocence, the machine had already started. The police report had been filed. The bank was reviewing the dispute. Their precious loan, her precious house, was under investigation. The cracks were spreading, invisible to them, but widening by the second. Madison's voice faltered. "You're not really mad, are you?" I tilted my head, meeting her eyes for the first time all evening. There was fear there, real, blooming fear, behind the contour and the mascara. "I'm not mad," I said softly, and I wasn't. What I felt was colder than anger, more precise. What I felt was inevitability. They had made a choice. They had looked at my life, my name, my future, and carved out a piece for themselves without asking. And now they were just starting to realize that the girl who always carried the weight had finally set it down. I excused myself before dessert, citing work in the morning. Madison didn't stop me. Mom looked like she wanted to, but didn't. Dad never moved. As I stepped into the cool night air, the door clicked shut behind me. And just like that, the game was over. They just didn't know they'd already lost. She showed up 3 days later, unannounced. I saw her through the peephole first, standing there on my worn welcome mat in a trench coat, too light for the wind, one hand clenched around the strap of her purse, the other balled tight at her side. Her hair was pulled back, but not neatly. Her lipstick smudged, like she'd applied it in the car, maybe in between deep breaths and frantic thoughts. I didn't open the door right away. She rang the bell again, more insistent this time. When I finally pulled it open, I didn't step aside. "Emily," she said, voice already cracked at the edges. "We need to talk." I said nothing. She looked past me like she expected to be let in, like she had some maternal right to my living room. But the air between us stayed still. No invitation, just the threshold and everything it now meant. "You went to the police," she hissed, and just like that, the mask slipped. Her voice was sharper now, brittle with accusation. "Do you have any idea what you've done to this family?" I met her gaze. There were shadows beneath her eyes, the kind that come from too many sleepless nights and not enough truth. She kept going. "This will ruin Madison. The bank is already freezing things. People are asking questions. Your father hasn't spoken all morning. Is that what you wanted?" She said it like it was a sin, like I'd lit the match, not just exposed the fire. I let her speak, let her pile the blame into a fragile tower, thinking maybe if she could stack it high enough, she wouldn't have to carry any of it. And when she finally paused, lips parted, waiting for me to fold the way I always had, I gave her what I came to give. "No," I said, my voice quiet, steady. "It's not what I wanted." I watched her shoulders relax for a breath, mistaking my calm for retreat. Then I continued, "But it's what had to happen." Her eyes narrowed. "We're your family." I nodded slowly. "Family asks," I said. "They don't want steal." She opened her mouth, maybe to argue, maybe to cry, but I didn't stay to find out. I closed the door, quietly, deliberately. That click, the soft snick of the latch catching, echoed louder than any slammed door ever could. It was the sound of something ending and something else beginning. On the other side, I stood still. My heart was steady, my breath calm. No shouting, no drama, just finality, wrapped in silence. She didn't knock again. Through the thin wood, I heard her steps retreat down the porch, her heels hollow against the concrete. Then nothing. Outside, the wind picked up, brushing leaves along the sidewalk like tiny exhalations. Inside, the quiet wrapped around me, not empty, but clean, undisturbed. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a cup of tea, and sat by the window while the steam curled into the air like a ribbon of release. Some doors you close softly. So softly, the world doesn't even hear it. But you do. And sometimes that's enough. It didn't all unravel at once. It happened in small, irreversible moments. The house Madison bought was placed under foreclosure review. Her social media followers, those curated strangers who live for her stage kitchen dances and sunset wine selfies, began asking questions she couldn't answer. Brand deals quietly pulled out. The facade cracked, and beneath it, there was just debt and desperation. I watched from a distance, not out of cruelty, but because I no longer needed to be close. The bank removed my name 2 months later. The loan, invalidated due to fraud, triggered a cascade of consequences, investigations, calls, attorneys. I signed the last affidavit on a rainy Tuesday. The clerk didn't say much, just passed me a black pen and a stack of documents that felt like freedom, printed in 12-point font. When I stepped back into the gray, misting afternoon, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean. My life had grown quieter. My apartment stayed uncluttered. I bought fresh flowers on Sundays. I walked longer routes to work. I started making pottery in a shared studio a few blocks from my building. A lump of earth on the wheel, slowly becoming something whole under my hands. It didn't matter if it cracked in the kiln. It mattered that it was mine. No one from my family called again, not after that last door closed. I wasn't sure if it was shame or pride or stubborn silence that kept them away. Maybe all three. It didn't matter. I no longer waited for apologies. I no longer needed to be understood by people who had only ever seen what they could take from me. One evening, in late spring, I sat on the balcony outside my apartment. The sun was dipping low, casting the buildings in that warm amber light that made even brick look like gold. A breeze moved through the trees, gentle and indifferent. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who bent, who yielded, who swallowed pain so others could feel full. The one who believed love meant sacrifice, and sacrifice meant silence. And then I thought about the woman sitting here now, the one who closed the door with grace, not rage, the one who chose stillness over spectacle, the one who realized that walking away didn't mean losing, it meant choosing. Sometimes revenge isn't fire. Sometimes it's air. It's the breath you finally take when no one else is speaking over you. It's the space you reclaim when no one expects you to. It's the quiet where your name no longer echoes in someone else's mouth, but rests, solid, in your own. So when I think about that moment, my mother on the porch, Madison's silence, the pages of forged signatures unraveling like lies coming undone, I don't think of pain. I think of peace. Because sometimes walking away is the loudest thing you'll ever say. And I said it with every step I took toward the life that was finally wholly mine. In the end, this wasn't just about a stolen signature or a fraudulent loan. It was about clarity. Clarity about who I was and who they were willing to let me become if it benefited them. Sometimes the deepest betrayals don't come with shouting or slammed doors. They come quietly, disguised as family expectations, wrapped in the language of love. You're the strong one. You never ask for anything. It's just paperwork. And for years I believed them. I believed that being silent was the same as being kind, that keeping peace was more important than keeping my own boundaries intact. But betrayal has a way of sharpening the air, of pulling your voice out from under years of swallowing pain. What I learned is that silence can protect, but it can also imprison. Real strength isn't carrying everyone else's weight. It's knowing when to put it down and walk away. You don't owe anyone the ruin of your future just because they share your last name. You don't owe forgiveness on someone else's timeline. You owe yourself peace. And sometimes peace looks like closing the door and not opening it again. Not out of anger, but out of respect for yourself. Because walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. And sometimes it's the most powerful thing you'll ever do. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever felt unseen, taken for granted, or silenced by the people who were supposed to love you, you're not alone. This space is for you. If this story moved you, if it made you think twice about what strength really means, don't forget to like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means more than you know. And trust me, what's coming next? Even more powerful, even more unforgettable. Stories of quiet revenge, poetic justice, and women who rise from the ashes they never set. So hit that notification bell. Because sometimes the softest voice tells the loudest story. We're just getting started. See you in the next one.